turn to Job 38. Job 38. We're going to look at talking with God. And be a little patient with us. We're having some malfunctions with my headpiece. We've got part ordered. So just bear with us. Does anybody have a quarter that I can borrow? Anybody?
We need to raise it.
Has anybody got $1 that I can borrow? Anybody got $5? I'm good. I'm just going to see how much we can raise. What I want you to do is we look at Job 38, and we're going to look at Job 38 through 41. We've been studying the book of Job. Job was a godly man. By all accounts, the Bible tells us he was righteous. And as we look at his life, then we see the incredible suffering that he went through. You know, it's interesting, as we were out Friday night going through the neighborhoods and just praying with people and sharing with people, there was a gentleman there, and he was very yoked, kind of sitting on the block, and he had begun his night. He had his 40 there, and he was drinking it. When we came over and told him what we wanted to do, he kind of wanted to hide it, but what was interesting is he kind of opened up to us and talked with Brad and I. The more we talked, you could sense and see the pain that he was in. And when we talked about, I asked him, did he have any particular beliefs about heaven or hell? And he was very honest, not disrespectful in any way. He said, you know, I believe I'm living in hell right now. We live in hell right now. With all the wickedness that goes on. And you can, honestly, you can understand where he's coming from. Life can be hard. It can be hard from both ends of the spectrum. There are those that seemingly do nothing wrong, and yet they suffer. And we have to ask, how could a good, loving God allow that to occur? Then there is the wicked. They suffer because of their choices. And that inside of us, we understand that. No, they brought that on themselves in a lot of cases. But it's when we see people who are trying, who want more, and we see that happen, or when, even better, when you experience it yourself. That's really when you kind of have to scratch your head and say, how can God be good and loving, and what's going on? That's where we find Job. Well, here's where we are with Job today. All of the book, the first 37 chapters, we watched this unravel and watched Job's life be played out in front of us. Job's asking the question, God, why me? Why this? Why now? His friends are, and Job is asking God this question. And his friends are asking, and they're trying to figure this out. Now here's what we're looking at today, talking with God. Now I want you to listen to me very closely. Okay? This is going to help you understand all this. And there's not a person in this building that does not need to hear this. I've noticed when everything is going Shawn's way, I don't have a lot of conversations with God. But I have noticed when something befalls me that I'm not very, I don't like, whether it's a hardship or just doesn't go my way, I really would like to have a conversation with God. Right? Now, hear me out. Everybody needs to learn this. It will help you. It'll make life better if you learn this principle. And then I'm going to show it to you in the Bible. There's a lot taught, preached, written, and sold on God talking to us. But I need you to understand something. A lot of those people, all right, and I'm going to prove this to you. A lot of those people teaching you about God talking to us, they're standing on programs on TV that cost massive amounts of money, and they're telling you what God's saying, and it usually behooves them financially. Not all, but a lot. A lot of books that are written on God talking to us, again, they're writing books and publishers require profit before books are printed. Now, what I want you to understand about God talking, when God talks in the Bible, there's two primary ways that He talks. We all want a God who will climb up on a sofa with us and let us just unveil our deepest, darkest secrets and complex questions, and we have that kind of God. but we expect a best friend who will there in return just explain everything laid out on the table and tell us the magic lottery numbers, right? Right? Only God doesn't behave that way. When God speaks in the Bible, you check me out. There's two primary ways that God will speak. And really sums up the one. He told Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. There wasn't any Abraham. Let's talk about, the family. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about... There wasn't this great big loving dialogue. God came, gave a command. When God met Moses in the burning bush, did he sit down and talk about the 20 years that Moses had been wandering around? What was it? Moses, how do you feel? Do you need a hug? That wasn't how God related to him. And what I need you to understand is, you see this quarter I stole off Doug? It has heads and it has tails. If it had two heads, would it be an authentic quarter minted in the United States? No. Would not. It has a head and a tail. You and I have different parts of our personalities and roles. That's what makes us who we are. Me, I'm a son. I'm a husband. I am a father. And I could go on to different aspects of who I am. Those primarily describe how I relate to a different group of people. Well, you know where that comes from, don't you? We're made in the image of God. So what I need you to understand is the longest account of God speaking to anybody in the Bible is right here. Job 38 through 41. I gave you some snippets of when God, in the form of the angel, Jesus Christ, spoke in the Old Testament, but there wasn't these big, long, sappy discourses. He came and gave instructions. Now here's Job, a righteous man. A righteous man. And he needs to hear a word from God. And God's going to sit down and he's going to talk to Job. But Job, he's going to talk to Job the same way he talks to all of us. See, there's two parts to God. All right? He is God. The creator, the sustainer of the universe. All right? And that means he's in charge. So he's not going to sit down and take a lot of counsel from you and I. There is the other side of that coin. Because some people's like, I don't like that kind of God you're describing. I don't like your God, preacher. What we want is we want whatever loving figure that came into our life and nurtured us in life. We want God to be that. And God's God. He's God. Amen. That's right. That nurturing figure that nurtured you, they may line up with the one true God. They may not, but it does not change who God is. That doesn't mean he's cold and impersonal. Remember the quarter that I stole off of Doug? The other side of that quarter is that this same God came to earth and lived 33 years. And walked where we walked. And took our sins on the cross. So that we might one day get to have that perfectly open relationship that we all want right here and now with him. So there's two aspects of God. I say all that not to confuse you, but I need you to understand. All these people telling you that they have these long two-way conversations with God. God has a two-way conversation one way. You praying to him, and you unburdening your heart, and he speaks right here. A lot of people don't like that, but that's because a lot of people don't listen. This requires you to sit and listen to God. See, even Job, as righteous as he was having this problem. Now, I want you to think about this. Listening is the biggest problem that I think America has. Okay? So, I want you to stick with me. God is about to speak. This is God. He's going to speak to you the same way he spoke to Job. And we need to know that. And you say, but I want want this loving, nurturing figure to sit down beside me and just give me all this comfort. You have to understand we're in phase 1 of a 2-phase eternity. And in phase 2, that part of our relationship with God will come, but you have to die to get that one. That's heaven. Right now, listen to what Revelation, because I want you to understand these aren't my opinions. What I'm doing is I'm going all the way through the Bible and piecing together who God is and putting you a big picture up there. And the more you know about God, the more you understand about Him, and truly the more you'll love Him and the closer you can get to Him here. But it says in Revelation chapter 4, it says, after this I looked and behold a door standing open in heaven, and first a voice which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, come up here, and I'll show you what must take place after this. And what's going on here, don't flip there, just listen. I've got some scriptures, but you stay in Job 38. Here's what's happening. The writer of Revelation wants us to know that you're in this state, in this era, this epoch, this age with God. Not everything's going to be revealed to us, including the fullness of our relationship with God. The best is yet to come. Amen. I don't know about you, but I enjoy what He's given me right here on earth. But the best is yet to come. And so Job is frustrated with that. He needs some answers. His children have died. His wealth has fled. His health has disappeared. He is essentially on his deathbed, and he has nothing to claim good in life other than his relationship with Jesus. And he needs some answers. And he begins to demand answers. And for the first time, God speaks. Listen to what He says. Chapter 38, verses 1 through 7. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. You ought to bring a Bible, because when you get to where you need to hear a word from God, your emotions will cloud your discernment and your judgment. And I have found that all these scribbling marks I make in my Bible, boy, they are very, very valuable. At 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, the sleep has left me. Did you see how God spoke? He spoke out of the whirlwind. You ought to underline that. Highlight that. Remember what I told you. That 10-minute introduction, it's because we want God to speak the way we want Him to, when we want Him to, on our terms. He wouldn't be God if He did that. See, the first lesson about God speaking to us is He spoke out of the whirlwind. Okay? That's going to be important. And He said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man. He said, Job, stand up and act like a man. That's what He said. I will question you, and I'll make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Now picture this. God's talking about creation. If you've ever had a house built or built a house, you know, you go out, you pick the spots, you dig the footers, you lay the foundation. God's saying, Job, you're demanding I speak to you. You're demanding I give you answers. Where were you when I laid the forms and the foundations of the earth? Tell me, Job. You get the point. He's establishing the relationship with who's in charge. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or stretched the line upon it, on what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Job, Job, he says, who are you to make all these demands? See, this is important that we understand. God's establishing the ground rules. He's setting it up. He speaks. Everyone's spoken for God. All of these friends have come and they've spoken for God. Job has spoken for God. And now Job gets up and says, the problem is, boys, none of you are listening. The problem is, none of you have the understanding to speak for me. And I want you to understand today, in the era and age in which you and I live in, that's the greatest problem the church and the world has. We're all busy giving our opinion on who God is and what He wants to do for us, and nobody's taking time to listen to God, the man with the answers. That's what He's saying to Job. Here, heaven seems to be shut up. Job is demanding to hear from God in a courtroom setting. He wants to sit down and ask God, why has He allowed this? Why is all this going on? But verse 1 says that God spoke out of the whirlwind. I'm going to be real honest with you. You need to understand something. Everybody, I know a lot of believers that pray and they want to hear a word from God. They want to hear a word from God. It's right here. It's as fresh today as when He spoke. And take a lesson from Job. Job didn't have a Bible. He's the oldest book in the Bible, the book of Job. You need to understand when God literally speaks, which this is literally Him speaking and it's recorded. He didn't speak out of the calm. He spoke out of the whirlwind. Many times in the Bible, as we study that, we see that. We all, it's human nature, we all want to hear God speak in the calm, in the sunshine. But that's not who God is. He's God. If we could control Him, He wouldn't be God. You see, what God wants Job to understand, and you and I to understand, is that we can't pin God down. What good would He be to us if we could? If we can manipulate God, how could He help us? He says, Job, I've got some questions for you. He says, verse 2, who is this? He says, get a hold of yourself. And as we delve into this, Job still wants to know, why is all this happening? Here's what I want you to understand. God speaks to Job. The longest recorded conversation by God literally and directly in all of the Bible. And here's what's interesting. God doesn't answer one of Job's questions. Because Job's asking the wrong questions. And that's why that you and I have to understand we have to trust God. You know, it's kind of like I was picturing this all week. I watched last week as Linda and Jack's children at that age, as they were going through VBS, and as they were dealing with them, and it brought back my children when they were that age. And I remember, you know, I mean, have you ever done anything more frustrating than try to reason with a 2 and 3 and 4-year-old?
Yeah.
Right? If there is, I don't know what it is. And you're trying to get them to do this. They don't want to do this. But this is what's good for them. And they don't care about this. You know, squirrel, and it's all, you know. But you understand, that's the lesson in this chapter 38 and 41. Job's got all these questions, and as we read 37 chapters, and we're like, I thought God was a God of love. What's going on, preacher? Surely He should tell him why this, why me, and why now. But it's kind of like those kids. We know what they need. They don't trust us because they can't see from our knowledge and perspective. God knows what we need. The whole issue is, when are we going to bow, quiet our heart, and listen? You remember Samuel said, well, wait a minute, what about Samuel? God didn't speak out of a whirlwind. That's because Samuel was a little lad, and he ran in, and the priest said, that's God speaking. Samuel, go back, and he was what? And listen. Problem is, we get so, all of us, I'm as guilty as you. As soon as something financially, health-wise, whatever goes in a different direction, I got 20 million questions for God, and I ain't got time to listen. I just need it dealt with. That's why He speaks out of the world. God didn't answer any of Job's questions because Job doesn't know which questions he needs to be asking. And so as we get into this, I'm going to narrow down. God answers. God gives 77 answers in chapter 38 to 41. For your pleasure, I've narrowed them down to 3. Okay? But here's what I need you to understand. God's answers are all questions. God gives 77 questions in chapter 38 through 41 to Job. But here's what we have to understand. God is instructing Job with what he needs to know. You say, why is it that God deals with us that way? Because just like when you were, if you're a parent or you've ever watched children or helped care for children, if you have any heart for the children you're caring for, there's a method to what you do, and they don't understand it, do they? I've been told by the best, most successful parents that maybe if you're blessed about 26, the old brain will kick in and they'll begin to see, because they have enough perspective to understand why you did what you did, why you chose what you chose for them. God's no different for you and I. Listen to what he says in Isaiah 55. My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So here's the first question that God asked Job. Now remember, I've taken 77, I've squished them down to 3. God looks at Job and he says, where did the earth come from? So Job is dumbfounded. He has no understanding of, one, what that has to do with him. And God says, Job, where did this earth come from? Where did all of this, how did it occur? Notice what he says there in verse 2. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? He says, Job, get a hold of yourself, man. If you can't explain to me how all of this that we see comes into existence, then you ought to listen. You see, Job didn't have a Bible. What's incredible to me is next week, chapter 42 is coming. That's the glory, hallelujah chapter, okay? That's when we see God. We get to see why God chose what he chose, why God dealt with Job the way he dealt with him. We get to see that God was good, is good, and always will be good.
Amen.
But Job didn't have chapter 42. He had to live it. Job didn't have Genesis 1. And what Job did have is all the stories passed down through the years. So Job's the oldest book in the Bible. And so here is Job. God asked him this question. He said, you need to go back. You see, Job and all those before him, their revelation, God speaking to them, was what? Creation. It's good enough for them. Next time an atheist needs to understand proof of God, let's sit down and listen and watch the sunrise and set for a while.
Amen. That's right.
It's exactly what God did. He said, Job, look around. I love this. He said, Job, do you understand how the night turns into day? Job, literally he says it. I could go through and read it, but you go through and read it. He says, Job, tell me, where does the night go when the day comes? Now you think a lot of people say, well, we've got this, we've got all these. My undergrad is in science. And in all my deep studying into science, do you know what I discovered? The deeper are incredibly intelligent, really, and I'm not being sarcastic, really, mark it down. Intelligent scientists delve into where darkness goes and how to explain light. The deeper they go, the more contradictions they come up with. And I'm not anti-science. I thank God for it. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm thrilled about the science that science provides for us today. Modern air conditioner. Can I get an amen? And we go deeper than that, but you understand. But I have several friends that are some of the best scientists in the country. And as we sit down and discuss this, the deeper they go into light and darkness, the more questions are raised and answered. And so God looks at Job and he says, Job, do you understand where do you put the darkness when the day comes? You know, Job's thinking he's not listening like you right now. You're thinking, what's this got to do with lunch, Pastor? Well, Monday, when all hell breaks loose in your life, Job's thinking, what in the world? Then he says, Job, and you ought to read it there, and you carry on in chapter 38. He says, Job, look at the water. He says, where in the world, who is it that measured the water? He said, like a baby, I coddled the water. I made a bassinet. I laid the baby in there, and it goes no further. You know, the earth is covered 2/3 water, if I'm not mistaken. You know, the deepest parts of the sea, some go 7 miles deep. Some of you couldn't care less, but I even got down to the foots and inches back there. If you see me after the service, is it bothers you? Do you know in the deepest parts of the sea, in the Pacific Ocean, and almost 7 miles down, there is fresh water springs. The oldest book in the Bible tells us that. Go read it. Go read it. So you won't be late for lunch. I won't read all of it. But go read it. God tells Job that thousands of years ago. And our scientists have only discovered it as of late. I mean, like the last 40 years. And he says, Job, tell me, who keeps the water right here, if 2/3 of the earth is water, and who prevents it from destroying all? I said, Job, can you explain that to me? Job, who provides the springs in the ocean? See, Job is so focused on himself that he can't see his answer. That's our problem. And so he asks Job all these questions, and Job just can't understand it. Listen to what he says in verse 12 of chapter 38. Have you commanded morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place? Verse 16. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Thousands of years ago, God told us there were freshwater springs in the deepest part of the ocean. We've discovered. Job couldn't understand it, couldn't explain it, but it's true. What's interesting is, I love this. In this, he begins to talk about creation, and we read it there, I think in verse 6 or 7, about how the cosmos, how the stars sang when God created creation. You know what's interesting? We put the Hubble telescope in space. It's about the size of a school bus. And what we've learned from the Hubble telescope is it tells us that the stars are older than the rest of the planet, than the Earth, and a lot of them are older than the universe. And here, God's saying, Job, because of what I did and who I am and creating the universe, the stars sang. You scientists, go check it out. You know what? The stars emit sound waves. And our scientists, after all the money they've spent on the Hubble telescope, they were so excited to tell us since they just read the book of Job. We might fill in a pothole or two in South Carolina, right? And listen, Psalms 147:4, he counts the number of the stars and he calls them all by name. Look up here for a second. When you study science, some of you know this. It's incredible. You know the old saying that no snowflake, there's no two common snowflakes, every one is original. If God cares that much about the design of the snowflake, you need to know that there are no two people that are identical. We are all unique. Amen. And there's not one of you that he doesn't care about. He tells us, Jesus tells us in the book of Matthew that he knows every hair on our head. Why does he know every hair on our head? I know it's more challenging for others than some. I know. But the point is, if he's that interested in how many hairs you got, just think, he's trying to tell you how much he loves you. Here comes our second question. How does the earth operate? He said, now, Job, you see all these facts, you know all this? Job, how does it work? Now, I'm going to get ugly right here. I'm going to start talking. Ladies, what does the little red light on the dash look like an oil can? What does that look? What does that mean? I may need security to escort me from the building. Right? You're like, I don't know. I just know it's not on E, right? Right? See? You say, I don't know. That's the point. As you look around, you can't deny God's fingerprints everywhere. We can't explain it or understand it all. And that's God's point. He's like, Job, now that we've established creation, Job, how does all of this work? Then God does something interesting. He begins to parade all of these animals. And I want you to read it. Go home and read there in chapter 38 and 39. 5 different animals he parades in front of Job. And we don't have time to go through all of them, but one of my favorite is the ostrich. All right? He puts the ostrich on display and he says, Job, have you ever seen an ostrich? Job's like, yeah, but God, what does this have to do with me dying on my deathbed? God, what's this got to do with me losing everything? I said, Job, son, have you ever seen an ostrich? Well, yeah. Now, I want you to think about this. Ostriches grow to be some 8, 9, 10 foot tall when they stand up. Ostriches can grow to be 300 pounds. But what's interesting is they have no nurturing instinct whatsoever. They just go and lay their eggs right out in the open for any predator to take hold of. And somehow God takes care of it. And he's like, Job, have you seen this ostrich? Job, why would I create an ostrich? Now think about it. A 300-pound bird that can't fly. And it starts running, and to be able to begin to move, it begins to flap its wings, right? Did you know that ostriches have been clocked at 40 miles an hour? That they can outrun most horses? And he's like, Job, can you explain why? Now, I know you're waiting for a great theological explanation. I don't know. God's got a sense of humor. I mean, a 300-pound bird that can't fly, flap his wing, and that's what it's got to do to run? I don't know. I mean, you know. That's why he's God and I'm not, right? But he says, Job, and he goes through the hippo, and he goes through the alligators and the crocodiles, and all of these things. And he says, Job, can you understand? Can you explain it? He said, Job, can you explain the eagle? Man, I'm going to tell you something. We had the most awesome experience while we were on vacation. We were canoeing on the New River, and here came this huge bald eagle. I've seen them there before, but this one, as we were canoeing, it seemed to float for 5 minutes around us. Now I know why our national bird is the bald eagle. It's the most magnificent. I've seen them in zoos, doesn't do them justice. When you see them out in the wild, you see them hunt. I mean, the way that they can see, the way that they can turn and maneuver, it's incredible. There were ospreys out there. Everything was scared of the bald eagle. I said, Job, do you understand how that thing can, from 600 feet away, see a fish underwater? And can manipulate the winds and the currents and strike that fish before it ever sees it? No. He says, then Job, the third and final question, how does it all work? back to the house. Let me leave the car alone, the oil and all that, right? He says, Job, you see my fingerprints. Job, you see, you see all these animals and what's their purpose? Now, he asks, Job, as you look at all creation, explain to me how it works. Do I have a lady in the house that can explain the combustion engine? You get my point, right? And Job is sitting there scratching his head and he's going, but God, what does it have to do with my suffering? God, how does that take care of real evil and wickedness in the world? God, what's that got to do with me losing my children? What does all of that matter? Then he asks in verse 8, chapter 40, Job, are you smarter than me? And all that Job can do is say, but God, my affliction and all of the affliction around me is just unfair. See, Job is doing what we do. He's not listening. He's not listening. Then God says, all right, Job, you want a courtroom? I'll give you a courtroom. So the last part of the conversation, God sits down with Job in the courtroom setting. There in chapter 40, verses 9 through 14. I want you to listen to what God says to Job in this courtroom. He says, have you an arm like God? And can you thunder with a voice like His? Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity, and clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of anger, and look on everyone who is proud and abase him. And look on everyone who is proud and bring him low, and tread down the wicked where they stand. Look up here for a second. He says, Job, you wanted a courtroom? I'll give you a courtroom. You're not listening, son. He says, Job, do you have the knowledge and the wisdom and the power to even judge the wicked? You're asking why I allow all this wicked to happen in the world, to all this good. He said, Job, if I give you the doers of wicked, the creators of wicked, the responsible party, Job, do you even have the knowledge to deal with him and still be just yourself? That's a pretty incredible question. Somebody said, why does God ask all these questions and He just doesn't plainly answer Job? Everybody look at me for a second. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you've endured that may not be healed. And I know what modern psychology is, that we have to unbox, unfold every single thing in our lives that's happened to us. But let me suggest the answer that God gave Job. A wise man, not myself, said that once I met God, all my questions disappeared. See, the point is that God is the answer to all our problems and our questions. Matter of fact, he said I had a million questions, and when I met him, none of those questions mattered. He said, why did God ask 77 questions to Job? He needed Job to get to a place where he realized that none of the situations and circumstances were greater than God. He needed to understand that God ultimately has a plan. And if you will trust Him with your life and your decisions and your future and your hurts and all your wickedness that has been brought to you, all your injustices, If you'll trust Him to God, He can handle it.
Right. Amen.
He is God enough. Let me ask you a question. You say, but Pastor, I just got to know. I need to know. Would you listen to me for a second? What if you had a teacher, and that teacher came in and gave you all the answers to the test? But never gave you the questions? Would it really do anything good? Listen to Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. We want God to bend His will to us. Whether it's out of arrogance, whether it's out of pride, whether it's out of misery, whether it's out of hurt, whether it's out of desperation. We just want answers. But what we have to learn is this. Just like our children, our small children, while we walk and breathe on this earth, we don't have all of the answers. And we're usually not even asking the right questions. Kind of like when we were young, right? But we have to put our faith, trust in Him. You say, but I don't have enough faith, Pastor. Then you're wrong. God gives that much faith to every person that lives, whether they ever place it in Him, whether they place it in science, whether they place it in psychology, whether they place it in wealth, whether they place it in sex, drugs, pleasure, whatever. He didn't give me any more faith than He gave you. The real question, the only question we need to answer, we need to get in a prayer closet with God, is where have we placed the faith He's given us? We think, well, if I got enough faith, it'll just... Listen to what the Bible says. Hebrews 11 is the great hall of fame of faith. These are the ones that got it right. They didn't understand, not just most of it, they didn't understand almost any of it. But they trusted Him. Listen. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that were visible. The answers to your questions and the ones you need the most answered, there's nothing you can put your hands on. There's one you need to turn to and trust. See, the answer is not why me, why now, and why this. The answer is who. You don't need to know the whys if you know the who. Jesus. Bow your heads this morning. The invitation this morning is going to be very simple.